and that the cultural industries, of which Carnival in our case forms a major part, represent a high value-added sector, generates income, employment, etc. And more importantly for the state policymakers, it has a multiplier effect. So that once you do Carnival, it has an impact on your tourism industry, your heritage, your accommodation, transport, etc. So they like that. Then, of course, there are the social reasons for Carnival. The arts and for the Carnival policy or the cultural policy. The arts and cultural industries leave a legacy to future generations. They boost national identity and prestige, what we call cultural confidence. The arts and culture confer indirect benefits, and the sector encourages artistic and innovation and has the potential, and note the word potential there, to facilitate diversity and democracy. Okay, so having said that, we can then say that cultural policy could be used as, or can be seen as, and this is why I am so attracted to the area, as a bridge between the various developmental spheres, social, economic, and political. So this means that a cultural policy can be thought of and developed simultaneously as an economic policy, as a social policy, and as an environmental policy. In fact, when you read some of the cultural policies from Australia and New Zealand, they talk about this cultural policy is also an economic policy, or a social policy, or whatever. So there's a growing body of research that shows, that underscores the way in which a cultural policy can facilitate joined up ways of thinking about formulating policies and about formulating development and so on. So that is very interesting. Okay, so just to look at this model of culture, the arts and cultural sector, again, so that we all know what we're talking about, and we'll come back to this in a while. So when we talk about the arts and cultural sector, we're talking about all of these things. And certain things like the Carnival move between these various concentric circles. So at the core, the first phase, we have what is called the core creative arts, which is where you have music, literature, visual and performing arts. Outside of that, you have another circle where you have museums, films, photography, etc. Then you have what is called the cultural industry sector, where you have heritage, TV, print, publishing, etc., radio, video. And the last circle deals with what is now being called the creative economy, where we talk about architecture, advertising, fashion and design, just to name a few. So this model is where policy has to intercede, moving between and among these various concentric circles. So now let's turn our attention to the Carnival complex and see how we look at policy where the Carnival complex is concerned. Okay, so can the Carnival complex then be used as a lens through which we can see and understand the state of play in the art and cultural sector? In the main, I think the Carnival can be used as a vista through which we can reflect, reformulate, or reset our approaches towards the arts and cultural industries in general. And this, again, because of its ability to join up, and I think all the speakers today talked about that, the various developmental spheres. So from a socio-cultural, a geopolitical, and an economic space, the Carnival gives some insight into the country's overall development in general and the cultural industries in particular. So I know that we talk about Carnival as a magical mirror, and I like that metaphor very much because it gives you a sense not just what's happening in the arts and cultural industries, but what's happening on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago. So when we look at the socio-cultural, through its products and practices, Carnival shows us who we are as a society. And I know that we've emphasized a lot of the Creole in Carnival, but Carnival also reflects the plural nature of our society. Social sections that mix but do not combine. So on any Carnival day, you look at certain masquerade bands and you can get a sense of the various social, ethnic, economic classes that play in particular bands. So if you were a Minchalite, or if you were somebody who played with Royal Garib, or if you play with Hearts, or if you play with Tribe, what does it say about where you situate yourself in society? So even though they're part of one celebration, they're still running on these different tracks, right? And we talked about the Camboulé and the Mardi Gras traditions persisting in the carnival. Then when we look at the political economy, the recent emphasis on the economic value has amplified inherent economic inequalities in our society. So for example, when Gillian talked about the commodification, all those inequities that I won't get into, we get a sense of what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to position that within the New School's plantation economy thesis that says what the plantation does is a system of codependence in an economic structure whereby the plantation economies depend on countries outside in the global north, or in this case China or India, for key inputs including labor, technology and capital. Okay, so we're seeing where we are. And then finally, I want to talk about the geopolitics. Relative to our place in the world, Carnival has been, like other Caribbean cultural products and expressions, Jamaica's reggae, the Bahamas' John Canoe, it has aided in the branding of Trinidad and Tobago's place in the world. And you hear Trinis saying, well, you know, there are over 50 carnivals in the global north that are modeled after ours. Okay, so that's something we talk about, Carnival actually making us there, putting us on the map, as we see. But even though we've made these incursions, we are still net importers, and I want us to be clear about this. We are still net importers of cultural goods and services. Okay? Right, so in terms of the structure now, we see that Carnival, as I said, encompasses many fields from what is known as the core creative arts to what is known as the creative economy. It's transnational, we talked about that. It straddles home and host countries in the diaspora. It has enterprises that are nascent by and large. They're informal and they're small and micro enterprises. And this is basically the business model that abides. It works to some extent, but that's what you have. And still, the carnival or enterprises operating in the carnival sector lack the basic infrastructure, legal and regulation, training and education, investment, the institutions of support, and most importantly, research and development. So that's the architecture that is not robust. And finally, I'd like to say that the value added for these industries are in the early stages of the value production chain, where less income is accrued. So if you look at your carnival structure, it looks something like this. So in the middle, we have the core carnival economy, mass, pan, kaiso, soca, and that can be, thought of as the core creative arts, which we had in the middle of the last diagram. And sometimes, very often, the people in that core economy, if you think of mass, pan, and kaiso and not soca, are the ones that are seeking state support. The business model or the business that they get, the money they accrue from what they do is not as much, and they very often need state support. Then if we go to the left-hand side of the diagram, we look at the ancillary economy, the events, food and drink, tourism, support services, we all know that. And then to the right, we talk about how media and advertising make a whack of money around carnival time, graphic design, photography. All of these are intertwined in what is known as the carnival economy, which you see a little clearer here. I call it carnionomics. Okay? And so it's the carnival economics, but you see again the core economy and the things that happen around the core economy. And to some extent, to me, this is why understanding the role of policy by the state or the formal policy is so important, because this is what the carnival is doing. So we have the ancillaries, we have the media values, we have festival tourism, the economic impact, and of particular interest, the overseas circuit, and how we move our artists and our products between the Caribbean and our diaspora communities. Okay.